Avtar Saini, former head of Intel India, tragically passed away while cycling in Navi Mumbai. Saini was known for his contributions to Intel's microprocessors, held 7 patents, and played a leadership role in the development of the Pentium processor and Intel's 64-bit architecture. He was struck by a speeding cab while cycling in Navi Mumbai on the Palm Beach Road early morning around 5:50 a.m. Located about 20 kilometers from his residence. Saini was aged 68. He was cycling alongside his fellow riders when a cab traveling at a very high speed collided with his bicycle from behind. And the driver, during his interrogation, said that he dozed off as he was driving all night, due to which he lost control over the cab that knocked down Saini's bicycle. This is not an isolated incident. We've been having a lot of incidents with speeding cars knocking down bicycles and not caring about other users on the road. So we're talking about safety of the vulnerable. Just yesterday again, Dalip from Delhi tweeted that Preeti Gupta was just waiting to cross the road. She was not even cycling. She was just waiting to cross the road, and a taxi driver hit the three of them and she died. It's being repeated in cities across India. Again and again, we see that the drivers are either going wrong side or there is scant regard for safety. Why is this happening? What can we do to make people safer on the streets, especially the people who walk, cycle, and are trying to be a solution in the city and not be a problem in the city? Why are we hitting each other and killing each other and causing a mess for each other? Who is responsible for this? Ultimately, while we are all, are the authorities taking any steps? Because clearly there seems to be a failure in the commons. Let's discuss this with some of our bicycle mayors today. I am joined by the stalwarts across the country. Dalip Singh Sabharwal from Delhi, who's the bicycle mayor of Delhi. Ashik Jain, who's the bicycle mayor of Pimpri-Chinchwad, is also an urban planner. Arshel Akhter, the bicycle mayor from Guwahati. Santana Selvan, the bicycle mayor from Hyderabad. And Felix John, the bicycle mayor from Chennai. They are all here to try and think about how do we make this work. Hey, thanks everyone for coming on the show and talking about this issue. What do you think we should be looking at, right? Let's go around the table and think of this, right? There are lots of things in this to unpack. Obviously, we are all shocked and we have expressed our shock in many different ways. But I think I want to look to the future. I just want to read out something that I'm just seeing in this. During the interrogation, Khade told the police that he dozed off as he was driving all night, due to which he lost control over the cab that knocked Saini's bicycle, right? He was booked under various penal codes, including 279 for rash driving, 337 for causing hurt by doing an act rashly or negligently so as to endanger human life, 304A, causing death of any person by doing any rash or negligent act not amounting to culpable homicide, and then other provisions of Vehicles Act. Now, here's the other interesting thing I want you guys to know is the accused has not been arrested so far, as the maximum imprisonment for sections applied, these the ones I just read out, totals to less than 7 years. There's also culpable homicide is something I was just looking up. There is a section 299 in IPC. Culpable homicide refers to causing the death of a person by engaging in acts with intention of causing death or having knowledge that the act is likely to cause death. Right? It's distinct from murder, but it does have certain, this part of having knowledge that it is likely to cause murder. I want to keep that in mind, as we go along. But first of all, your thoughts on this. I heard that Delhi had a death also recently. Dalip, do you want to go first and talk about that?
Yeah, I think day before yesterday, after we got to know about Avtar Saini in Mumbai. Yesterday morning in Delhi, Preeti Gupta, she was around 45 years of age. She met with an accident and she died on the spot. Surprisingly, she was not even riding at that point in time. She was with other two riders waiting at the extreme corner of the road to cross the road. And there was a mini truck which was driving, rashly, and he hit the cyclists. One of the cyclists, got injuries when Preeti, was directly hit and she died on the spot. And these three riders were from Noida. They were in Delhi at that point in time at Ames, and they were going to flag off to see off the other riders who were supposed to go for their golden triangle ride. Very unfortunate that happens.
This
Means
is just sad.
we
What do you
at
what?
time every time we see, there's always a victim shaming whenever the cyclists meet with such accidents. But here, we can see that she was not even riding. So just waiting to cross the
What
road,
is this victim
and
shaming? How
so
does it work?
what happened? See, victim shaming is like, whenever we have always seen, and especially in our community, it happens. The first thing that we ask whether the cyclist was wearing the helmet or not. Then we ask whether the cyclist was riding on the extreme left or extreme right. So we always ask questions, or we always try and investigate and interrogate the victim only, and we never question the culprits. So that is victim shaming.
Arshel, what do you think of this whole thing?
Yes, very sad. I agree with what Dalip said about victim shaming part. This has been going on since some time. The problem with the victim shaming part is that the cycling community is basically, we get awakened when we hear such kind of incidents. We don't tend to understand that this is a very common thing, happens with almost every day, you can say. For example, last month we had the um, National Road Safety Month. Right? This is data which came up that in Assam, every day 3% dies. Then again, so this is something the community needs to understand. The community needs to come up. It's not just the cyclists like us, the entire community of cyclists, whoever that may be, whatever purpose they are riding for. So that needs to be understood. And yeah, we need to. I think this incident should become, I believe, should become some sort of a watershed moment for us. Probably we can start something in the lines of the Stop the Kindermoord movement that was started in 1970s in Netherlands.
Santana, you also had some incident last year in Hyderabad, right? Similar thing. What happened there?
Yeah, exactly. 2 years back, we had an incident. One of us, right, Nitin Agarwal, who was actually completely in the leftmost part of the leftmost lane. He was riding, and three or four riders together at 5:30 a.m. Pretty much previous day to New Year, which is actually 31st December morning, 5:30 a.m. So he's just starting to ride. People are starting to ride. At that time, suddenly a drunken drive car completely just crashes on him, and then the car actually goes to the leftmost platform, the pedestrian platform. So it is actually deliberate actually hit. Basically, it's a drunken drive, completely out of control kind of thing. So this is actually, that was very unfortunate. And then from there, actually, if I can actually explain more from after that, we actually took that as a revolution movement. We actually work in a revolution mode, which is actually when we say revolution, it's not negative or making it any sick or something. It's more of a positive revolution where we make and show the strength. That is what actually we did. We that was a very big trigger point for us. We actually felt for it similar to what we are today. We actually used that opportunity, and then I should not say opportunity word, but it is actually a good thing for somebody, one of our family members actually has died, right? So for that, we used that opportunity, and we used that as a trigger, and we started to show huge presence in the city.
I want to come to that though.
Yeah,
the Hyderabad cycling revolution and other things. Let's just go around. Felix, Chennai has also had a good movement. Touchwood, I don't know what's going on with the hundreds of people who don't have a voice, but no such famous incidents that kind of gathers people and at least rallies the media. Oh, somebody, this thing happens. The bottom line text, like Dalip was saying, is there are hundreds of others we don't notice, and it still happens. What are your initial thoughts on this thing?
I agree with Dalip actually, because only when a famous person is hit by a car for cycling, we tend to notice, and the media comes to take attention on this particular issue. But that is one of the way to work However, 2-3 days before we had an incident in ECR where there was a wrong side vehicle. It was not a fatality. The person who was riding a cycle was hit by a some auto rickshaw, and she had a fracture in her hand. So these things are happening almost every day. Some to known people among us, some to unknown people among us. So there is also statistics that says that every minute so many people are dying on road due to vulnerability in the fast-moving vehicle zones and so on. And I feel that our movement should become more broader to connect to the masses, not just stick to one small group and come out with the impulsive reaction. I'm not saying this anything in a wrong intention, but I'm seeing on a bigger picture, bigger level, because if we need national attention, um, we have to think about our cost of promotion. Is that a priority of a city or a country? So until and unless this becomes a priority or a priority for state or a nation, this won't be talked much. This won't be heeded by many of the people who are in authority. And to make this more, I think we have to expand the horizons because it has to be a collective effort of citizens, irrespective of the mode of transportation. Because the accidents happens for two-wheelers, for four-wheelers, for anybody, and pedestrians, of course. And pedestrian data is very scarce. We don't have actual data of how many pedestrians are facing this fatality. And unfortunately speaking, when I see all this kind of news, fatality is becoming just a statistics number. And I don't know how much is too much for people to react. We are looking at proactive measures, but what we are getting is reactive measures. The authorities, they wait for, okay, I don't know, but I'm being very sarcastic and about this issue. Is there a threshold for fatalities for them to take action? Like 100 people has to die and then only will take any action, like 200 people has to die. I don't know, but is this morally correct? These are the questions that runs in my head when this kind of news comes out. Obviously, I'm extremely saddened about the situation, and I was also impulsively interacting with ChatGPT, Gemini, all these things to understand what can be done. Write an open letter to this thing, but what kind of impact are we going to create working individually in silos?
I want to take this to Ashik really. Apart from wearing the bicycle mayor hat, he's also an urban planner and designer. He asked a very important question. When is it okay? When do you want to react? What is the threshold in which you will start reacting and making things safe? We'll get into the infrastructure side, but what do you think of safety in general? Like Dalip says, she wasn't even riding. She was just waiting to cross the road. She was just standing there. There are people who are just standing. Is there even a place to stand? People are just standing, looking, want to get across. What cities have we built is the question. Ashik, how do you look at the safety thing?
First thing that comes to my mind is that all of us, there are about 55, 60 bicycle mayors in India. All of us are envisioning us, all of our cities to become cycle friendly and NMT friendly when the situation on the ground is something really opposite to that, is what I feel. When it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to our plans, our policies, all of that is very reverse in terms of the situation on ground. I also feel that we're trying to create, we say that the school kids should cycle. When adults are not safe in the cities on cycle, how do you expect the kids to be to feel safe on cycles and while walking as well? So this actually, and if you try and decode all of this, what I realize is that in terms of the infrastructure in the city, all the infrastructure that is designed, and is the decisions for the infrastructure are taken from backseat of a chauffeur-driven car, where the problems of the cars are supposed to be fixed. Like in Pune, in Pimpri-Chinchwad, when a politician stops at a junction and feels that there's a lot of waiting time at the junction, he would want a flyover or underpass there. So that thought process, and actually they propose these kind of infrastructure which are very heavy in terms of cost. Probably that one flyover or one subway that is constructed, the entire neighborhood could have good cycling infrastructure. So two things, when you try to decode, is that what part of the city are the accidents happening. Because to look at it, the core cities, in the core city, the lane widths of the roads are pretty narrow, and actually, in fact, it makes it difficult for accidents to happen. In fact, the peri-urban areas, the periphery of the city, or the highways are where the accidents happen the most. So, and that is because everyone is expected to be at higher speeds there. So this, I think, more than NMT policy or more than cycling plans, the first thing that the cities probably could do is come up with some traffic calming policy or traffic calming measures for the city. That I think is the most crucial things. And throughout the city, the peri-urban areas, the core city, we should definitely come up with something that actually gets traffic calming executed on our streets.
Before we get into that,
yeah,
the solutions itself, Arshel, safety as a thought.
Yeah.
Who should be having that? So when we do all of our advocacy, we go and talk to the government and says you need to have, you need to do this or you need to do that. Safety as a culture, where do you think it should come from? Should it come from the society? Should everybody imbibe it? But there is, of course, if you look at industries, they want to have safety in their offices just because you want to prevent incidents and be liable for it. Where does the blame, liability, consciousness of safety, who all should start looking at it now on our roads? And safety of what, right? That's also there. What are your thoughts on that, Ashik?
Yeah, it should come from ourselves. It is our lives. We are all responsible. It's not just like we put the blame on someone. We can just blame the blame to some car driver who dozed off. We just can't blame it to the police. We think we're not enforcing the laws. It's all comes up to us. How responsible we are. We as citizens, we also need to be responsible. How we drive, how we move, and also we need to understand that this is one incident where we are hearing in the news. We never know when we will be in the news. So I believe we are, as of now, we have been all the people who are talking in this session here. We are all being lucky. Also, we are just being lucky not to be in one part of the statistics. So I believe it's everybody's responsibility. You just can't chuck it up to somebody else. And I also agree with understand what Felix said. What is the threshold limit? We just can't like wait for such small incidents to come up, and where do we draw the line? When do we start acting on it? Regarding cycling, whenever I talk to people, it's basically the biggest fear of people of cycling. When it comes to cycling, is basically the fear of life and limb. Right? They're very much scared. The first question that comes to my mind is, I'm scared to ride in the peak traffic. So this is something we need to talk about. We need to understand how we can solve it through maybe engineering, through enforcement, through education.
We'll get to that.
All this, I think the whole concept of road safety needs to be understood in a bigger way. There we already have road safety committees, road safety departments in the transport department. We need to work with them, work with different stakeholders. I don't have a correct or exact answer as of now, but what I believe is that we don't have any silver bullet.
Santana, what is this whole concept of safety and who should imbibe it? Where should we go with this?
Yes, when we have safety in the center as a word or as a mind map, right? If you spread out what is coming, right? Which Arshel just mentioned, engineering, enforcement, and education, that actually spreads out. And then there is also a fourth angle, which is actually the personal. Whatever we can actually do from our own measurements of personal safety. Though it might be a motorist or it can be a cyclist. So it's our precaution what we do, right? That's the fourth part of it. And the fifth part, the cause. If you go to the cause of it, it's all, if you see anything happening on the road is actually because of overspeeding, wrong side driving, traffic rules violation, and drunken drive. If you see, these are the actual causes which which actually touches upon these four aspects, which is actually in engineering, which actually splits into different infrastructure items, starting with pedestrian and cyclist and carriageway, whatever on the road. And then the enforcement wise, more about stricter punishment. Today, which you just read in the beginning of the call about what is the punishment we're actually giving to the drunk and drive. He will be there on the road within 2 months or so. That's how it is actually. There is no strict punishment. From an education aspect, it actually folds into two aspects. One is the actual precautionary the RTA level, which is actually the Road Transport Authority, where the driving tests are there. The precautionary levels where there has to be a proper education from a testing level. And there is also awareness from the traffic police level. They need to drive these things where they need to have more awareness for the motorists that please see pedestrians and cyclists, they are also to be considered, and that kind of thing. So, and the last aspect is a personal safety where everybody, we all need to be very much be aware. From which Dalip started, like we need to wear our own safety gears and stuff like that. But that actually drives to another question: why livelihood cyclists are not probably maybe. I'll turn my answer like that. So they are not visible actually. They are not mentioned. If something happens to them, it doesn't come in the news. So it's like that. So we need to follow the proper road rules as well, where we need to stay on the. I've known many of our cyclists also. They use the center lane right while riding. So these are all certain things we need to be aware as well. So and also the various precautionary measures in terms of the road itself, school zoning, a lot of things can be done. So from a 360-degree angle, it's not a one answer, but there is an answer which is actually 360-degree. Each and every stakeholder has to work, including the community like us.
So I wanted to get to before we got into the solutions, I wanted to understand the ownership of safety. So Arshel mentioned there is a road safety cell within the transport department. Every place has that. Absolutely nothing. Road safety, in my opinion, for police officers seems wearing a helmet. So they'll stand on the roadside, catch people wearing a helmet, and nothing much else. So passenger safety and road safety, there is a confusion in the minds. I tried to declassify that and say it's not about just telling what the passenger needs to do. It's about being able to take care of the person on the road. And nobody pays for taking care of somebody else. They will pay to get you a helmet, one seat belt, airbags, everything people will pay for because it keeps you safe. What it also does is let you more risk. It's classically called the Peltzman effect, right? They'll let you more risk. One is the safety cell. Is there something we can? Shouldn't they be owning this first, right and center? And the second is the RTAs. Today, with all this delivery boom, I have observed there was a recent study that was done in Bengaluru among all these auto drivers and two-wheeler drivers and everybody else. It was noticed that they were getting licenses far more easily, and the older auto drivers and bus drivers had more knowledge of traffic rules than the most recent ones, which obviously means the way the licenses are being dished out now are just they aren't paying attention. They're probably getting it for money. That's my accusation. Verified or unverified, it's just that you pay, you will get a license. What, considering these two things, Felix will go first and then jump to Ashik. Where do you see the ownership of safety and the amount, like what Santana is saying, you have to go big with all of these campaigns and education, and we'll come to the engineering, which is our favorite subject. We have to break our head on that. But on the awareness side, who owns the safety campaign and who should own the safety campaigns as bicycle mayors? What do we think?
Talking about safety, I think it comes to at the moment it comes to the point where we are passing the ball. It's all about the blame game. Either the rider or the driver. And none of the authorities have ever taken accountability for any of the road incidents. Till today, have we seen any authorities come forward? Yes, we have did wrong, and the roads have not been properly put in place. There was no pedestrian crossing. Nobody takes accountability. I think that is the point where it makes me think that we are talking about a strong paradigm shift in thoughts in everybody. Because take, for example, the driving schools, the license issuing agency, the road infrastructure, all these things, if I see from a bigger perspective, I find that everything is done for automobiles. I want to drive, I want to get the license as quickly as possible, and I want to jump in. The use of automobiles is made very easy for everybody and every sector and every authority or everybody inside the agency, and ultimately that is being given priority. So this is what I keep saying all the time, that we are prioritizing motor vehicles instead of prioritizing people. When the paradigm shift happens to think about people, then all these points will come into implementation. For example, if you're talking about people safety on road, then the driving school itself should teach them to, okay, see, you have to prioritize people. See, the best example is the Western culture. Despite the traffic and all these things are there, when people intend to cross the road, most of the cities, the drivers stop the car and they respect the pedestrian crossing.
Felix, there are some, it's a very important point you bring out. I want to come back to that responsibility thing, because you said, who is responsible? The mandate is fractured. Like if you look at the US, like you said, there is something called Occupational Safety and Hazard, OSHA, or something which looks at places, built places and the safety. There is NTSB, which is the National Transportation Safety Board, which looks at safety. Where is that kind of an overarching? Because the infrastructure is built by one person, license is given by RTO. There's this one more guy doing something else, and safety cuts across. It's a horizontal across all of these things. Ashik, where can we think about this? I don't know what this safety cell in this transport departments really do. How do we think about safety? Should we start looking at that ownership and setting targets? Who owns these targets? Who should own? Sorry.
I think the overall problem is that it is consciously the entire society is at fault to look at it. If the entire society, because if you ask the general public whether they would prefer a flyover over some cycling infrastructure, I think most of the people would say, yeah, we want to have that temporary convenience over the long-term safety or long-term comfort and long-term convenience. They would want the temporary convenience. Secondly, I think the people who are responsible to take care of the safety, probably the traffic police, their job, while you look at them in our cities, they're just trying to manage traffic, and they just want the traffic to flow smoothly, and all the traffic should be moving very smoothly. In fact, in our city, like I see people, the traffic police is hiding from the people so that they can get caught. Like they would stand somewhere below in a niche where they're not seen, but when people are crossing and they break the traffic signal, they would want to catch them and get the challans paid from them. So that probably is not the responsibility of the traffic police. And in fact, actually, when we go and discuss with various stakeholders with our designs and plans, their thought process is that you should give more space and more space for vehicles so that the vehicles are moving smoothly. And there is this constant argument that happens with all these major decision makers or the management team on the ground. So I think there's a lot of gap there. And to look at it, I think there definitely should be something which actually cuts across all these various departments or all these various. In fact, actually, it is at times very stupid, I would say. There are multiple committees. There is a district level committee which is talking about safety. Parallelly, there is a city level committee. There is some ward level committee. There is a smart city committee that talks about safety. And none of these guys, there are different people in different committees, and none of them really sit together and discuss it at a entire city level or probably the state level. I think we need to put that system into place where the representations from the ward happens till the state level. So I think that also is something that could be thought of.
Dalip, Ashik was saying that people still feel that the roads need to be wide, and they're asking for it, and hence they are getting it. But the people who are asking for it are obviously in the motor vehicles. You've been working with people who are the invisible. How do you ever get their voices to be heard? Because they are not asking for the wide road at all.
See, this is an actual fact. It happens with me as well. Whenever I'm going to my work every day on my bicycle, I always meet the captive cyclist. and I tend to ask them about the challenges that if they have any, and they have never talked about any challenges. They are happy with whatever they have. Now the problem is, see, as even they understand, they have that, somewhere there's a consciousness that okay, they won't be heard, so they do not raise that voice. And as far as we when we talk about how they would be heard, it is important for us to actually make our existence visible amongst the other road users. Because you see, demands would only be fulfilled when we actually show our presence. So our presence is missing. Maybe we have become invisible because of the uh, number of the car users on the road, or maybe because the captive cyclists they do not come forward, or maybe we leisure riders, they are leisure riders, they actually do not consider them to be a part of that community who use bicycle as a mode of transportation. So I think, in order to get heard, the first thing is that we have to show our presence. So that is missing somewhere. Because if we talk about the recent accidents, you would see that, we know that the captive cyclists, when they meet with an accident, they are never a part of the headlines. So even if I talk about the leisure riders who have recently met with the accidents, even if I talk about the security, the gears, they are always wearing helmets. So when we talk to them about taking initiatives, when we talk to them about doing some campaigns, when we talk to them about raising the voice and demand, the safe infrastructure, they never come forward. You won't believe, yesterday only, I talked to, few of the group owners, and I wanted to do something today only so that we at least show our presence. And they had their conditions, know who would come in the evening, we will have our morning ride. So they are more concerned about completing their weekend rides. For them, after such incidents, the only initiative, sadly, it is very sad that the initiative is limited to doing a condolence ride or lighting candles. So we as I said, as a bikes network, I always feel we would have to set our priority right. So I think we also need to somewhere think about it, how we want to take it further. Because to bring
that's
the
what I'm getting
change,
at, right?
it is
So if
important, we all become a part of it. Because without the involvement of people, no change is possible.
Arshel, I just want to bring back to this conversation around how do we pin authorities that can be responsible? Can we create, like Ashik was saying, Arshel, there is the different people talking about safety in different smaller pockets. And the road safety authority, which you brought up, is idle in most of these places, and they only do helmet drives. I have not seen them spend on any campaign or anything. It's a part of the transport department, while enforcement, this is the home department under the police, and all the metros are being built by the urban development department, for example. How can we all agree on pegging the ownership at least with the road safety cell and make a call out saying that all the road safety cells that the transport department has got, what are they doing on their job, and how do we we'll come back to the voice. I mean, you can pull that in as well. What are your thoughts, Arshel?
Okay, before I go into that part, I just like to point out that we also need to bring the automobile industry. They have also responsibility here, because as of now they have been like focusing on the amount of GDP and the amount of employment that they generate for the country, the economic cost, cost that they are like contributing towards the economy by selling cars and all. We also need to bear, they also have some onus in this, because the sell these cars and automobiles, they're just selling the speed and the luxury of these things. Like, and as we know, like there are some technologies like ADAS and all those which can actually help in um, reducing impact for and making pedestrians and cyclists safer. But then these are basically in the higher end vehicles. They also need to understand that the life lost on the ground also impacts the economic of the country. And we know how the healthcare sector of the country is. We have seen a lot of people lose their lifelong saving just to save a person. And forget about the person who loses a life is fine. I understand, it's gone. But then if the person survives, look at the economic cost that the family goes through. I think the road safety cells are basically centered around the numbers. I was just looking around the National Crime Reports Bureau NCRB data for 2022. I realized that most of the accidents that happen, I'd say car crashes, not accidents. These crashes actually impact mostly are two-wheelers and four-wheelers. But the important fact is that the fatality rates for the vulnerable road users like pedestrians and cyclists are much higher than in case of a two-wheeler rider or a four-wheeler. I think in Guwahati also, like for example, last year we had a couple of accidents in the highway, the Guwahati bypass. There were some studies done, and they realized that these spaces didn't have footpaths. There's the areas were like marked that accident-prone areas. There's the suggestions was for making good footpaths, but they didn't come. I didn't see much coming into fruition. So these are coming, and I also realize, like I have said earlier, also that they're basically reactive in nature. I have met some people in the road safety departments. They're basically saying that they're hard pressed for time. They are on the road every night looking for accidents. But that is the reactive action that they're taking. They're not waiting. They're waiting for accidents to happen. Sorry for the words that I'm using here, but that's the way they're working. They're not taking proactive actions. Whatever studies says, we also in Assam we have the Road Safety Act in place. With Act says that we need to have pedestrian and cycling infrastructure, because we need to understand that in a road whereby we have different people going in different speeds, you just cannot expect a person who is walking or on a cycle to compete for the same speed as another motor vehicle. The human body is not made to resist such kind of impacts. So these are things we need to understand, and I think the owners also needs to come to the automobile industry. They also need to come up in this. It is not just enough for them to fund some road safety survey, but they need to understand that they need to their responsibility comes up to them. How they teach, how they impact the people, how they advertise the products and all.
Very important point. The ADAS features you're telling me, for those who don't know, is the advanced driver assistance systems, which has collision detection and other things. They are not mandatory right now. It is there in, like you said, in the advanced cars, and it is an optional thing which costs a lakh or so extra. And people usually, and I've seen people want to turn off half the features. They don't want the lane assist because it doesn't let them weave in and out. And some people just don't want collision because it just stops too abruptly, and it's causing other people to crash in because we don't leave enough space. So there's a lot of things in culturally how we have grown, is that all the advanced features that makes the car safer for other people seems to be an irritant for the person sitting inside the car, right? So be that as it may, coming back to trying to see how do we campaign for getting road safety into a systematized way of doing things, right? Enforcement on the road, like you said, is reactive. Even road safety department, if they are only reactive, what's the point of having a road safety department, right? And who is going to go and say this needs to have ADAS? This road is not certified safe enough for, right? I talked about this culpable homicide thing. I want your opinion on this. Should they move this to 299 from 304, which is not amounting to culpable homicide, to saying that even though you didn't, what was it? Not taking enough precautions. In fact, I would say 299 shouldn't be imposed on the driver. It should be imposed on the government guy who made it like that. You know there are going to be cyclists over here, and you built it knowing fully well that you're enabling a collision here, which means you're culpable homicide. So somewhere we have to look at that one. Ashik, if you want to go, and then I'll go to Santana and Felix on who should own road safety broadly for the vulnerable, not just for footpath alone, right?
Correct. Yeah.
How?
So, if you look at the umbrella of all the vulnerable road users, and if you just compare the cause of these crashes versus the victims of these crashes, you will find that it is very clear that the high-speeding vehicles, motor vehicles, cars, the bigger it gets, the worse they are in terms of the cause of accidents, versus the victims are all the smaller entities, be it the cyclists or the pedestrians. So one that is very well established in various studies that have been carried on for the last 15 years, I would say. And I've been actually looking at that. And the secondly, I feel one important thing that we've been discussing is an overarching a system that takes care of road safety in a city or in a region. But the problem with those committees is that the representation is very wrong there. Everyone who sits in those committees are all people who who reach there in a car, and they probably don't think about the vulnerable road users. So we keep trying to do all these exercises where we want the commissioner also to come down on a cycle. Today evening, I'm taking on a cycle ride on one of the streets that we had recently designed. So I think these decision makers also should come down on the streets and walk themselves and experience all these things. I think that representation part is really missing. Like most of the committees that I see, they would want one person. If I'm we are the bicycle mayors, they would want me to be there, but then they don't want to follow up because we start talking against them, and they want that, and they stop calling us also after some time. So that also I have experienced. And it is also difficult to get into all these different committees who have different. There is a transport for all committee. There is a non-motorized transport committee. There is Harit Setu committee. There are multiple committees, and we've requested commissioner to club all those committees into one big committee which takes care of all these things. So I think that also should be thought of.
No, I kind of agree with you. I think the road safety cell that he was mentioning, some department, it's all inside transport department, and transport department only gives licenses to cars and motor vehicles, and they don't, and all of the cycling and other stuff is either done by the urban local body or inside the urban development department. The second thing is also coming to Santana. This is about the people now, right? What is the kind of culture we have around driving and value for life, and how, like Felix was saying, somebody will stop in the other country to have somebody walk, but we don't. What is this cultural thing, and what have you tried to do with this Hyderabad cycling revolution? And you had some success in cycle tracks also. Let's hear that. And
Sure, Sathya. So, the previous question itself about who should be pinpointed in terms of safety. My answer for that itself is, it is actually like everyone. It's there is nobody, one person we cannot do, because it is actually 360-degree, as I said initially. Secondly, in order to address this, I will come to the people part as well, which all touches upon this as well. So I see it very simply. If you, I imagine what is the ideal, right? What is the ideal where everyone actually drives properly? Car users also there, pedestrians also there, cyclists also there. I see from more of a right brain, so not into data, but it actually, this is one perspective, right? Where people are riding properly, they are riding on the lane, they are following traffic rules. There is no wrong side driving. There is always understanding between eye to eye, understanding between the pedestrian and the motorist. They look at each other, they wave. That is the ideal thing which Felix is actually seeing, which I've also lived in US also. I kind of relate perfectly. People respect. I think that actually has come because of the enforcement as well. Basically, they're all afraid initially, and then they started changing themselves, and the motorists actually started to stop for the pedestrians and all. So where I'm actually coming to is, there are two aspects or three aspects in terms of the overall solution perspective. One, it's all simple thoughts, actually, very layman thoughts, but it actually works, is what I believe. To start with, one is the driver education, solid driver education. One of my person is there here, on a professional person who has written a book on driver education. He tries, he cries, he tries to put across everywhere. His name is Naresh. Top Driver is the Twitter account. You should actually look at it. Very fundamentally, he keeps on telling, and he has tried everything from he tried to reach different departments, he tried to reach out minister. So all he's trying to do is driver education. Fundamentally, if everybody is very clear and solid, we don't need technology. We are actually talking about ADAS and all, right? Think about it, the brain itself is a very, human being itself will have empathy, will have they will be kind. When they're properly trained and educated, they will probably ride safely for themselves and also I'm thinking of a very ideal world, but I think if you come down, if you think simply, I think it will actually work. So one is the driver education. I'm going to tell three parts actually. One is that solid driver education to the core. As you also said about new drivers, very interesting statistics you said, where new drivers are not is easily getting driving license. That's a very important statistics we need to know. But driver education, fundamentally, if we clear out, if we push out, if we throw out to all the community members, all the city residents, that is one solid bucket. Second is the people aspect which you mentioned, where or also it touches upon what Dalip also said about increasing the community. So if we actually cycling community and the NMT community, right, pedestrian and cyclist community. So I'm talking a larger scope. If we are able to, as bicycle mayors, we are all community leaders. If we actually influence and spread the message about active mobility, sustainable mobility, across as the communication catalyst, right? If we actually can spread and reach out to people that NMT is a very important very value adding transportation. So what will happen is this community will actually increase, which is actually pedestrians and sustainable transport. So when this will also increase, the first primarily driver education also is in a very solid shape. So it might be 10 years or so, or 10 to 15 years maybe later. But I see if these two towers are increased, which is actually driver education fundamentally. Second is campaign about active mobility and adoption of active mobility and sustainable mobility across. That is the second one. And third bucket is basically pinning the government officials when there is huge presence from the second bucket, right? Huge presence from the active mobility users, more cyclists visible, more pedestrians walking, then automatically the decision makers are compelled to decide for the majority, right? So that is the third bucket, which is actually pinning and influencing them and lobbying them in order to make this happen. So I think these three are very fundamental things. If we can actually do together, I think India level we can actually make a huge influence. But actually, I'm coming to your thing where Hyderabad cycling revolution, which you mentioned. So my fundamental thing itself is that only, where I work with the community, obviously with the stakeholders as well. Community building and keeping it strong, and that will people will listen to us. And I mentioned to Ashel and Dalip people when we met recently. So this is actually the soft power which we were talking. So when we have more community presence, when we go to a place, they will listen to us. I think that is the conclusion for the third bucket. So active mobility campaign and building the community. Second is the driver education fundamentals across. Actually, we have to throw that campaign across. Third is being in touch with the stakeholder and managing them and influencing them.
Where do we go from here on? Safety for cyclists, and of course all the infrastructure pieces we have discussed many times, and I know it's not rocket science what they have to do. We've told multiple times, and I think even the authorities know what exactly we want. Where do you think we should go from the awareness of safety? Should we look at the people, like how Santana was saying, let's go and do sit with the RTOs and look at driver training, or start that separately, or should we worry about the road safety cell and have them pick it up, or it's everything? Is it the government or the society or the business, like Arshel was saying? Should we go after them? How should we focus our efforts?
A lot of things. So many things we have discussed, so many points we have touched. But I do have enlisted some devil's argument here. Some questions for.
I am that supposed to be the devil today. You're supposed to give me the answers.
I'll give it. So we talked about the culture of safety. At the moment, the culture is to be killed or to kill someone. That's how arrogant we have become on road. Either I have to be hit by someone, a tipper lorry or something, or I want to hit somebody. But the best case scenario here is I have the braking system that can stop at the closer point of time before the fatality. This is one thing. Santana touched upon 360 degree of safety, that we are all responsible for these things. But you know how the corporate works. The corporate works on KPIs, deliverables, outcomes, right? So when we're talking about 360 degree of safety, that everybody should be aware of what is happening around. What about the children? What about the disabled group? What about people who can't think on their own? We are talking about inclusive safety. So how do we answer these questions? How can they become responsible for their own safety? For my kid wants to go to a shop across the road. How does he become responsible for his own safety? Are we expecting a newborn baby to be concerned about safety on road, safety of crying, safety of being disciplined and obedient? It's not going to happen. So 360 degree, I don't think so. I think the other way that I was thinking around on the culture is basically we need to bring about KPIs of changes in departments. At the moment, what I see as the KPI, key performance indicators, how many number of challans, how many number of fines, how many people we have arrested, how many cases we have solved, how many, this, the tradition, what is happening within the agencies. But I feel the KPIs, if changes to the level, how many people we have saved, how many pedestrians have crossed the road successfully, how many cyclists are cycling on the road without any issues, how many murders we have prevented, how many avoidable deaths have already been avoided. So if these changes can happen, I most probably we are starting to think in a more people-centric manner. The other point we were discussing about is safety is something that cuts across all the departments, irrespective of whatever it is. Safety is key priority. And again, I refer MNCs here. They all have a QC department, quality control department. The quality control departments, there is QA and QC, quality analyst and quality control. The quality control basically what they does is whenever there is a sales proposal from the company to a client, the quality control doesn't allow, as long as the quality standards are met, doesn't allow the proposal itself to go out. That is their KPI basically. And these safety cells, whatever it is, they has to be autonomous. They have to have their own KPIs in standard of saving people, saving number of children. And every proposal, everything that comes down should go through this filter. And unless and until they have met all the standards of safety for all road users, irrespective of what mode of transportation they use, this proposal should not come to light. Unfortunately, today it doesn't work that way. It is always the politician who comes up with one particular project. Oh, I have this project. I want, because the road seems like this, I want to put this flyover, or I want the intersection to be more smooth and no signals. It has to go continuously. So this is how the current thing is evolving. We are talking about long-term goals, long-term solutions, and in long-term, what we are looking at is sustainability. The entire globe is moving with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And what is sustainability without having pedestrian infrastructure and without having slow-moving vehicle infrastructure? If the roads are meant for only high-speed vehicles, then all interior neighborhood roads should become or belong to highways department. So there is another way of approach what has happened recently. This is also opening, kind of eye-opening for me. Unfortunately, the departments within Chennai, at least the highways department, they have a standard code and they follow that code which allows the motorized vehicle to be prioritized. So when we go and talk to them, no, see, this is not going to happen in this particular road because there are people crossing from here and there, and there are other things that will affect the people's movement. They keep saying, no, this is not how it works. The code says this. So there is another approach happening that we are working with Unified Metropolitan Transport Authority. They are proposing to MOHUA to mandate or amend the code itself to include pedestrians and slow-moving vehicles on road, that the highway code should respect all these uses as well. So there is also this other approach that comes into play. The last point I want to touch upon is community. Communities is strength for everybody, for all of us, for anyone. But unfortunately, I realized that after a year, not within a year itself, that it is becoming increasingly dangerous within a city for people to be on road on a bicycle. Like Arshel said, I don't know when I'm going to be in the news. So when I have that question, how am I motivated to go and ask another person to, come, let's take the bicycle and go on road, or motivate them independently to go on road? Like it's like a small community that is living inside a forest of predators. Assuming the fact there are lions and tigers and all kinds of other beasts in the forest, you wouldn't want to expand your community there. You will want to relocate your community to a more safer place. So, what are we going? Where is the compromise? Where are we going to find this compromise and come to an agreement? That's a big question.
Yeah, you can run, but you can't hide. Dalip, you had some points.
Yes, I just wanted to add 2 cents, about for when we talk about road safety. I think, for every problem in the society, I believe we are the cause and we are the solution. Now, why I'm saying that, when we talk about the road safety, let's, take 2 examples. One, with the existing infrastructure and a change in behavior of everyone. See, even if I, change the infrastructure as we are looking for, but the behavior is not changed, we cannot have road safety. However, if the behavior changes, if we all start, behaving sensibly and responsibly, I think even with the current infrastructure, the existing infrastructure, we can have safe access on the roads. So that's why, when we say the community building, the awareness has to start from our own home. I will give you an example. Today, in the morning, we had a walkathon kind of an event with the RW in my colony. So I was the race director there. So I did not miss that opportunity. I took along, took with me my staff, and, I had a session with all the RW members. So, of course, when they talk about health, I talk about the environment. And when they talk about the initiatives and they say it is not possible, so what we expect them, that okay, if you cannot be a part of that active mobility and you think you cannot ride, at least you have to respect the other users on the road. So, as I said, we are the solution. So it is important for all of us to start this awareness campaigns, from our own home, from our own colonies, from our own RWAs, because if they are not riding, they are the one who are driving. So roads were never unsafe. It is our behavior on the roads that has actually, made the roads unsafe. So
Sure.
this is critical, before we go for, of course, infrastructure would need improvement with time to time. Today, the requirement is different. Tomorrow, the requirement would have another challenges and another, needs. But behavior is something that needs to be changed if we actually want to have safe access on the roads.
Yeah, so I agree with that. So I'll get back to that behavior. So I want to conclude with some going around as to the next action on safety. Again, like I said, we can go around on infrastructure and we've all spoken about it many times. But I think pinning the next steps on safety. Arshel, I was just going to ask you, he was saying, Felix was talking about KPIs for the road safety cell, right? I mean, they are, like you said, they're just chasing accidents, reactive. How do we, is that the right organization? Of course, not everybody has a unified metropolitan transport authority that Chennai has, for example, and we have something equivalent of that, which is not nearly necessarily that. Where do you think the KPIs for what kind of things should we look for with the safety cell?
Yeah, having KPIs do make sense. I'll just try to start with delve into the SDGs, right? We have SDG 3, and in that goal number 3, in that goal, target number 6 is about reducing accidents, right? And we another goal is goal number 11, where the target number 2 is about sustainable transportation. But there's one big problem with that. It's basically talks about the inputs. It's not talking about the outcomes. It basically says that we need to invest in public transportation. It doesn't mention anything about cycling per se in that particular target, and it doesn't specify anything regarding the outcomes that we should look forward to. Even the same thing with the Niti Aayog's SDG dashboard, there is nothing related to transportation or road safety.
So I think these can be incorporated. We need to understand that the inputs only will not matter. That we need to think about when it comes to SDG goal number 11, target number 2. We need to understand whether these inputs, the model will uh, uh, shift the modal share towards NMTs, to public transportation. These are not included because we understand, you ought to understand that we behave under either some, there should be some disincentive and some incentive for us to make some behavioral changes. We do not do it just for the outcome, uh, uh, love of people. Right? Everybody in this the moment that we're in, we're just running around to earn our livelihood. There's some, we don't have time to think about the any other road, any other person lying on the road. As of now, we're just fighting against, we are just traveling towards our workplaces out back just to earn our livelihood. There has to be some incentive for us to, or some incentives for us to make some behavioral changes. KPIs do make a change, but then this KPI should also be basically based around the outcomes that you're looking for.
So typically what had happened is, Ashik, there's this nice rhetoric that people use, like in Sweden, they used to say zero deaths or zero accidents or whatever. That's a useful, it'll tend to zero, it'll never be zero, but at least it's a good target for people to say, okay, let's go for that. What is the role of setting such targets in KPIs, and who do you think should do it? Is Road Safety Authority for now, at least between Arshel and me, we know we both have it in our states. I don't know if it is there in the other states. Transport Department owns it. Isn't that, doesn't even seem to be the right place to have it, but it is there. What do we do? What do you see as road safety issues going forward?
Yeah, I really like that point where everything is very reactive, and in fact, we should look at preventive measures rather. So the first thing that comes to, we already spoke about the institutional setup and how that should be managed with representation of various stakeholders throughout the society community. So that point is very well established that it needs that kind of representation also. Secondly, I think at policy levels, there are these new policies which needs to be adopted. When it be it the traffic calming policy, Pune has actually come up with the traffic calming policy and they've adopted it. So the traffic calming policies becomes very essential, especially for a city at a city level. Along with that, it could be supplemented with NMT policies and all the other policies, road safety policies, etc. So that those policies are also important. The third thing probably that comes to my mind is the way licenses are distributed. I have taken the license exam and the questions that are asked are weird. What does this signage mean? What is this speed limit? And all those signages, whereas there is no responsibility that is actually inculcated within the person. Like, can't we ask them questions of what is the penal code that you will be charged with if that this kind of an accident is committed or if this kind of crash is done? So those kind of questions also should be part of the entire system where we are trying to give license or distribute license. I think second important thing is the aspiration of the school and the college kids. The school and the college kids, they want to shift from either cycle, walk or bus towards this powerful vehicle. So the rhetoric or the idea is that you are supposed to move to a bigger vehicle, whereas the responsibility while you are using these vehicles is not really inculcated in this at the school level. So education is one important thing where actually interventions should also happen. I think the second point is the infrastructure stakeholders. All the stakeholders who take decision about how the city is supposed to be planned or how the city is supposed to be designed, be it the traffic police or the engineers within the municipal corporation. I see there are very few engineers who know that this is the way traffic could be calmed or this is the width that is required. In fact, our policies say that the 7-meter width is required for 2 lane, whereas international policies have started saying that you need to reduce the width to 5.5 for 2 lanes. And the lesser the width of the road, the safer the city becomes. Urban roads don't require. We are trying to adopt policies meant for highways into our cities. So that also is something that has to be looked at. Our decision makers or the politicians are also not aware while they are taking decision of how the flyover or a underpass is going to work. So, and one important aspect again brings me to that important aspect is while we are planning our cities, there is no way or no systems to add non-motorized transport infrastructure. All we are doing is we are trying to convert these vehicles and the size of the vehicles into PCUs and passenger car units, and there is no mention of pedestrian or a cyclist there. So one pedestrian walking on a road versus one cyclist going on a road versus one car moving with one single driver on the road, they all take up different spaces, but the weightage to the car is 10 times more than a pedestrian walking or a cyclist. So this entire motion, and there is no way you can actually tap down and convert the like, we need to have more handlebar surveys, we need to have more walkability surveys while we are designing the entire infrastructure. So that part is completely missing right now, and we've been closely working with Pimpri-Chinchwad and other municipal corporations close by to understand this entire narrative and understand this entire thing, where pedestrians also become part of the surveys, the cyclists also become part of the surveys, and the infrastructure is designed in a way where the equity is established. So that point is also very important. One important again point is the speed limits. We have cameras installed in our cities, and I was having this discussion with one of the commissioners, and he said that the cameras are not able to capture moving vehicles. So motion detection cameras, motion like captures cannot be done on the cameras, which is the main purpose of installing cameras is to establish safety and to capture the people who are, even if it is a reactive thing, we need to know who's caused the crash. So that also, the motion detection thing is still not part of the cameras, most of the cameras in our cities. So that also has to be looked at. And whether or not we have installed cameras at various locations, that also. We're coming up with the idea of some dummy cameras also, so that people are aware that, okay, we need to be safe in this particular segment. And lastly, I think there are two important points. One very important thing that I learned at IIT Delhi is planning and design works better than laws. If you design your streets and design your city in a way where it becomes people friendly, it becomes safe for everyone, then, for example, if you've given a very nice zebra crossing or a raised crossing, it is mandatory for people to stand behind the zebra crossing line. If there's a traffic calming measure done 10 meters before the junction or 20 meters before the junction, automatically the speed of the vehicles is lowers down. So this entire thing, that design works better than laws, this is important for our stakeholders to understand the nitty-gritties of design and planning in this entire thing.
So I'll summarize these things now. There is license reform. That's one, is that we are dishing out licenses based on something done so many years ago, and there are signboards in there which don't even appear on the road that you might learn. And we are not talking about inculcating a sense of responsibility, that the driving test doesn't inculcate a sense of responsibility. It's more like a check mark, and most people are able to pay through. Related to that is what Santana was saying, is how do we get people to understand the real import of how do you drive on the road, what do you take care of, and all that. These are both related. One is officially getting it done, another is community people coming forward and initiating this conversation, like top driver, to say how do you take care of the vulnerable and things like that. There is the road safety cell, so we have to come back and see who should we hold accountable when something like this happens. Of course, there are lots of reactively, there is one. The preventively, what is the road safety? What are the road safety cells doing? What are the different departments doing with the vis-a-vis road safety, other than celebrating that day with some poster and some helmet, something? What are they doing? Then we are also talking about, I do think we talked about stricter penalties. I don't know if we agreed on that. So maybe we can go around once with everyone. Concluding thoughts with, should we have stricter punishments?
Yes, I think yes, because enforcement plays an important role here. And I mean, escaping with 500 rupees should be disincentivized, and then probably the license should be punched. So in that way, they are more afraid of committing another unforeseen incident. Dozing off or drunken drive will ultimately, make them a non-driver in the near future. So at least this can be implemented and come into place. Just one more thing, there are two ways that we can change the behavior. One is using the tool of fear. The other is learning to be self-accountable. And that is where, like Dalip said, the change has to happen from within our home, within the community, because we are looking at a larger scale behavioral change. We are not able to control the people who are related to us. We are not even able to convince them to behave in the positive way. I think we should, being all of us, we are all responsible citizens here, and inculcating this habit within the family, the relation. Don't be a j driver. Focus on the road, reduce your speed limit. What is the point of rushing in 80 kilometers for 800 meters and then stopping for the signal? Uh, so all this kind of nudging should happen from ourselves also, and at the same time there has to be deeper consequences for people who are violating the rules.
You should make memes for that. Rushing very fast at 800 and stopping. But that's a very nice point, Felix. It's about carrot and sticks. Santana, what do you think? How should we wield carrots? How should we wield the sticks?
As I always go back to the same board which I drew, which is actually everything. So it's not one thing. So carrots and also sticks. So enforcement will actually definitely will change things, because that is how the I mean any Western country would have turned. Even our people who actually go to foreign countries, they follow rules because they're afraid about getting a challan or getting caught by the police. So enforcement will actually drive things, will change things for sure. At the same time, education stands a major role. Having said that, I wanted to tell about something, just a little flow of things where um, in our city, in order to have the traffic flow properly, what they have done is that basically the commissioner, police commissioner was talking in a speech. I was there, I was listening. So at that time, he was saying, any traffic flow is more like a water. So it has to flow, continuously flow. Should not stop anywhere. So here, what they have decided on, what they have implemented in the city is that all U-turns. So there is no signal. So continuously water flows. So if I have to go from within 2 kilometers somewhere by car or a two-wheeler, I need to drive a little bit more, like 4 kilometers or so, and then come back. So here, I will say one by one, I will just split what has happened with that. One is car users will be happy in the sense where wealthy car users who's not worrying about petrol, they are easily able to ride. They are not stopping anywhere. That's the rule is actually created for them. Actually, if you see, they are the most advantages in this. Second, what happens? A Rapido driver who's very meager in his careful in his petrol usage, so he has to drive long way. But what happens? Automatically, he is actually doing a wrong side driving. So here is where the enforcement actually fails. So we are actually telling this poor fellow and challaning him with for his poor thing, right? He's actually coming in the wrong side and he's making an accident. Obviously, it's a problem for us, but they see the effect here. So this enforcement actually is a little bit coming down. And then if you see one more thing, in this whole game, pedestrians, there is no way they can walk. So there is no crossing. So this is amazing, I think, scenario where if you see they are putting a rule nicely. The biggest advantageous person is that car who doesn't care about the petrol. Amazing. They're so flow. I've seen one. I've seen. I've sitting there in the car. One signal used to be like half an hour waiting time. That free flowing. Actually, I'm very happy in that. But I also tweeted about that where the exact same signal. I cannot walk as a pedestrian. I cannot run as a jogger. I saw that there as well. I was there as well. So that is amazing thing. And the other thing apart in this is the wrong side driving automatically happening. Today morning also there is a incident for a wrong side driving. 100 kilometers one bike is coming and he just one of our cyclists actually got discharged just now. All checks done, everything done. But here also there is a problems happening in terms of the wrong side driving. Net it has to be 360 again. I'm not putting accountable. I'm not putting the children or the inclusive people on accountability, right? I'm saying 360 means we should not lose the larger context. I'm saying everybody is accountable. Everybody is responsible in this. Is what I was trying to say to mark it for Felix. I'm not putting blame on children, G. So you have to understand that. So we have to don't take that as don't leave out the larger context. So here it's about education, enforcement, also obviously engineering. So if I think about it, even if we have whatever roads are there, we should be able to live with the proper NMT, more audience, more users, and also with the limited car user. Car users also has to reduce. But yeah, with the current system itself, we should be able to coexist. That should be possible actually, if we think about it simply.
Yes, I would, start with what Santana said. Even in Delhi, we see they are trying to build, signal-free roads. So giving more convenience to the motor users and thinking least about the pedestrians and the cyclists. So it is happening all across, the country. And, we think, being a capital, Delhi is somewhere privileged. But to be very honest with you, Delhi is really complicated because there are multiple agencies working here, and one agency comes under the central government, the other agency comes under the state government. So that is the major challenge when we go to them for any proposal or anything. Now, even if we talk about the strict laws and rules, we see that okay, there have been recent amendments, even in the Hit and Run Act, 2024. So that is now called Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. So we already see there's a lot of resistance, that if there's a case of due to negligence, you want people who are driver to be held accountable, and they should be behind the bars for the 10 years. So we are somewhere still not able to decide what exactly we want. So if there are no laws, we crib. If there are laws, then again we actually resist. So that's the problem we are right now witnessing. Now, when it comes to infrastructure, we have often seen whenever we talk about the pedestrian friendly infrastructure, whenever we talk about cycling friendly infrastructure, the only development, to be honest, I have seen is the picnic spots or the selfie points. This is what I see. Whenever we talk to them about the pedestrian friendly and cycling friendly streets, the government, the agencies, they come up with picnic spots, they come up with the selfie points. So that is something we need to work on. So we have to let them understand. They should understand what is the basic need that we are looking for, and the reason why there's a gap, because the decision makers who are responsible to take decisions, who are responsible to design the streets for the pedestrians, they never walk. They are always car dependent. Those who are responsible to make our public transport efficient, they have never used public transport. So without experiencing it, they would never understand the actual need of the end users. So that's where we are lacking, and why even after putting a lot of efforts from all across the country, we are still not able to get where we want to.
I agree with the point that we need stricter laws. But then again, when it comes to think about it, we had made a lot of changes in the Central Motor Vehicle Act a couple of years back. So a lot of high penalties and all those were mentioned. But then again, when we need to understand what are the negative extra risk this can lead to. When you say, like for example, when at the very high rate charges for a high penalty for not wearing a helmet, there are opportunities for the enforcement officer to seek rent out of it. Means right. Like say, okay, I'll not charge you 1,000 rupees, 10,000 rupees if he gives you 500 rupees. We need to understand that part. And apart from that, stricter laws we have, India has some of these most strict laws in many of the acts. And when it comes down to actually imposing those penalties, or conviction rates are much lesser. For example, in Delhi and Mumbai, there are a lot of people have been given speed limit tickets, but still there have been instances where people having multiple speed tickets have been flouting the rules. So we need to I believe what I believe is we apart from having strict rules, we also need to find out ways how we can actually increase the conviction rates and impose more penalties. I think in that case, I believe we need to take the help of technology right as now. For example, the rule that the hit and run case that Dalip mentioned, one of the primary reasons it was opposed was because there was basically it just said that any truck driver, if he hits any other vehicle right on the road, right, any flees, there will be some lot of there will be huge amount of penalty imposed on him. But we have seen there are videos shared in the social media. We have seen There are people coming from the opposite direction, when drunken drivers were coming from the opposite direction, almost about to hit the trucks, right? In that case, if the truck hits the vehicle, smaller vehicle, it is the liability falls on the truck driver. So in that case, what I believe, we need to take the help of technology. I believe as of now, the cost of cameras and storage devices come down. Maybe what we can do is make it mandatory for have a dash cam in our vehicles. That way, I think that it is mandatory in some of the countries. That can be done. Even ADAS system cannot be cannot be integrated in all the vehicles. Probably a dash cam can be integrated. That way, at least, I just tell you one incident that happened in Assam a few years back. One of these longest bridges on the Brahmaputra was inaugurated a couple of years back, called Dhola Khodia Bridge. So in Assam, we don't have so many infrastructures, right? So a lot of people used to go and see those places. So it so happened that one of these families where there's a parked their car and on the bridge, parked their car, and was the entire family was just taking photographs. Right? At just one moment, out of the blue, there's a young kid of about maybe 4 or 5 years old. He just decided to run across to the other side of the footpath, across the road. And this bridge was empty, and the car was moving, and the car actually hit the boy, and the boy died on the spot. And and the person driving the car, he was obviously caught, trashed up as usual in Indian cases laws. He got out simply because he had a dash cam in his vehicle, because that actually proves his innocence, and it was basically the fault of the parents who actually were not controlling the child. So I think this, if we have this kind of cameras in the trucks and all, probably the people who they believe they will be at the fault, they will be charged. They will have some evidence to prove that this is not their fault. I think this one of the solutions. But then again, I believe we need to take the help of technology, and like Ashik said, design for specifically urban areas is most important. Design is how you can make people change their behaviors, and obviously we need to work with the community. When it comes to community, what I need just to understand, tell you that the community is actually, when it comes to cycling community, we obviously need to build alliances to everybody, with all the stakeholders, all the civil society organizations working, the pedestrians, for other maybe elderly, for the physically challenged people. But then as a bicycle mayor, my basically that connectivity is the cycling community. But when I come to the cycling community, I also realize it is highly fractured. We have the people who are into long distance cycling, adventure cycling, who are people who are into recreation, fitness, who are into people who are into racing, high end gears. All these people do connect together, but then they are not talking about the people who commute. They are not talking about the livelihood cyclists. So when we talked about the building the community, we also need to work in. Firstly, as bicyclemen, I believe we need to take a cue from the like I started mentioning, take a cue from the LGBTQ movement, that how they have developed the whole movement just a decade back. The perception that people have about the LGBTQ plus movement, the negative perception, the portrayal in the media, the mass media or the popular media, just changed drastically. Their laws have been made for them. Probably we can come up with some specific flag for the whole cycling community, maybe a logo, maybe some slogan, maybe hashtags. That is, I think, how we can build up the community, build up the whole community together, not just the cyclists, even the pedestrian as well.
But the first thing actually is a very interesting cartoon that I'd watched like 10, 12 years back, which is called Goofy Motor Mania. And it talks about the behavior of a person while he's in a car. In a car, he's called Mr. Wheeler. And when he gets down from the car, he's called Mr. Walker. And Mr. Wheeler, and the same person, when he's Mr. Wheeler, he has a very different perspective when that power vehicle is there with him. And when he gets down, there's a very different perspective of how he visualizes or sees the city. So I think that is a personal perspective also. Secondly, I feel that our laws, our guidelines, and our the recommendations, guidelines, all these things should very clearly establish what a urban road is and what the highways are. And the guidelines should be different for both these entities. The highways are meant probably to reach faster, or to for the freight to reach faster, for all the cars to reach private. So there's a different methodology and a different system to design those things. But when it comes to the urban areas, there are pedestrians, that are very various vulnerable groups walking around. So the design guidelines, the laws, the design guidelines, all the recommendations should be very different for both these things. Third, also, like we were earlier discussing, that the width of the MV lane should not be derived by the number of cars or the PCUs, because the urban roads specifically, they do not just have mobility function, they also have place function. There are also places for people from all different groups to come there and enjoy a street. So once that perspective is also inculcated in the decision makers, they'll probably will start seeing changes, and which are actually being experimented in different parts of India right now. So that change from thinking of a street from a perspective just of a mobility function versus expanding it to the place function as well. So that also needs to be changed in our city. And lastly, I think one very interesting point that you made, the responsibility of all these crashes should not just be the driver, it is the authority, it is the people who designed that street, it is the people who executed that street, probably the contractor who's executed, because it could be one silly mistake of the contractor that has caused that. So all the stakeholders should be very well examined before coming to any conclusion regarding the crash. So that also is the last point.
That's a good way to end on. I think in the we all agree that we have to take steps to not make this happen going forward. There are multiple touch points of safety, but at the end of the day, if we start understanding our accountabilities and valuing life in the city and who's doing what, it ranges from good design to responsibility to enforcement to education to making sure that we are putting responsible people on the road and not treat road like this casual thing that is just there and you can do whatever you want, right? Some amount of seriousness in this public space is going to be key for us as we scale. It's not just automobile ownership, but it'll always be more people walking, cycling, and taking public transport in all of these. I think we need to start paying attention to this. Thanks everyone for being on this show and jamming in with your valuable thoughts. Thanks a bunch.